Hello and welcome. I'm Sandra Seapack, and thank you for joining us today on Our Ventura TV. Our special guest on the program today is Kimberly Coley. She is the Executive Director of the American Red Cross here in Ventura County and Pacific Coast. Thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thanks for having me, Sandra.
We're so excited to hear more about the American Red Cross and all the great things they do, especially here in Ventura County after some of the disaster situations we've had. So I'd like you to give us an overview of the American Red Cross and what you do.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
The American Red Cross is obviously a national organization, but just as you said, we are very much local. Mm-hmm. We have been around for hundreds of years, and in fact, right here in Ventura County, we just celebrated our 100th year of providing local programs and services. So we're extremely proud of that.
Good.
Most folks recognize the Red Cross as a disaster relief organization, and of course that we are.
Yes.
We also do a lot of work in a variety of other lines of business. We collect and distribute blood locally. We also, of course, teach health and safety classes from your CPR and first aid and babysitters to AED. The list goes on and on. We do the disaster response and the preparedness. We work a lot internationally, and we also work very closely with members of our military, their families, as well as veterans.
That's great. Those are some really good points that you bring up, because I didn't even know how much military service that the American Red Cross does. That's such a big help. Very good. You know, when disaster strikes, relief can't wait, and the American Red Cross is always there. People are very well aware how much service you give to so many people, especially when we had disaster striking here in Ventura County. I'd like you to talk about that and some of the things that you did when we did have some incidents happen here in Ventura County.
Sure. So our volunteers, and we are 96% led by volunteers, just average community members like you and I.
Right.
Because of them and the generosity, of course, of our donors, we really are focused on preparedness 365 days a year.
Okay.
So all year long, volunteers are training. They're taking classes and courses online, sometimes in person at our office here in Camarillo. And they're also, preparing our supplies. So going through, we have a disaster warehouse, making sure that everything is stocked and ready to go. Oftentimes, folks wonder how we're able to respond as quickly as we are.
Right.
Well, the answer to that is we have pre-stocked trailers.
Okay.
And they're spread out throughout the county. They're pre-identified into areas that are out of flood zones and out of fire zones.
That's good.
And they're also strategically placed next to venues where we have a memorandum of understanding in place for a shelter site.
Okay.
So each of those trailers, and you'll probably see them now that that they're out there.
Absolutely, right.
They are stocked with supplies to stand up a 100-person shelter. Nice. So when we get a call, and we're always activated through our county partnerships and government partnerships, and so when we get a call that we need to set up an evacuation center or an overnight evacuation shelter, then depending on where the location of the incident is and the closest trailer and the site, we go and we hook up a truck to the shelter trailer. We get the supplies over there literally in 10-15 minutes. We're ready.
That's great.
We have volunteers on call all year long, and they are just at a moment's notice available to step in and help friends and neighbors.
That's great. How is local support coordinated with national support? I know that the two certainly do so much. So let's
I'm glad you asked.
How we do that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. Mostly because we are very local. We have volunteers, like I said, responding at a moment's notice.
Sure.
But for Thomas Fire, for example,
it
was a huge incident. And of course, this went on for days and months. And we're still providing services to families and clients who are part of the recovery process.
Okay.
But during that moment's time, our volunteers locally stood up the operation for several days leading into weeks. But people need a break, right? After certain hours and certain days of being on that operation. So because we are a national organization, we do have the ability to mobilize resource, and that's personnel as well as fleet. So we brought in vehicles that could access the areas that had been damaged. And so we brought actually volunteers from 46 different states in to
Wow,
help
how
with
wonderful.
the Thomas Fire.
That was
so that
big
is
help.
the beauty of being a national organization. And I'll also tell you that during the hurricane seasons last year, when we had so many of the devastating events across the country, our local volunteers deployed to those as well.
Right.
In fact, we had a vehicle that we sent all the way across the country, driven by our own Ventura County volunteers who were there aiding our friends and neighbors across the country.
So everybody helps everybody.
Exactly. We
That's
share the
beauty of
love.
it.
It is one Red Cross, and
That's
that
great.
is why it is so important that folks recognize
Right.
just the importance of the local, but also the
Sure.
national footprint.
And being here for the Thomas Fire and all the help that you gave just so many people, and as you mentioned, it's still ongoing. It was such an incredible amount of resource to have for many of these people. I mean, you guys were right there, when it hit. I am just amazed how that continues to happen for all disasters that go on throughout the country. This takes an exorbitant amount of money,
Absolutely.
a lot of funding. Is that something that you are constantly rebuilding with, getting funding to do all these
Right.
things?
Well, it is extremely important that people understand
Right.
that, we're obviously accepting donations year
Right.
round, and we're also working on preparedness year round.
Okay.
So in order for us to be prepared to respond, it is extremely important that we have volunteers and that we have the generosity of the, Ventura County public.
Right. Now,
And
if people are interested in volunteering at a local level
Right.
here, or perhaps, should they be needed to be deployed when disaster strikes elsewhere, how would they get in touch with you at the American Red Cross?
Yes, and thank you for asking, because especially during Thomas Fire, we had
Right.
people showing up right and left. Everyone wanted to help, and we were so grateful for their generosity.
Okay.
To get started with the Red Cross as a volunteer, we request that everyone go to our website, and if folks don't have access to the website, then they can come into our office on 836 Calle Plano here in Camarillo.
Okay.
And all we need is them to fill out a volunteer interest form. And by submitting that online or doing it in our office, then that puts them in the queue to get contacted by our team, who will then walk them through the steps in terms of what they're interested in, what their abilities are, how much time they have. There is a job and a responsibility, opportunity truly for everyone at the Red Cross. And so we like to sit down and personally explore what the options are. So, I tell people, if you were interested in helping during Thomas Fire, most likely you're going to want to help again.
That's great.
And part of the process is to do a background check, and it's extremely important because you're interfacing with the public.
Okay.
So there is a bit of a process. So it's great that you asked, because we really want people to sign up now, so that it's not if, it's when
Right.
the next thing happens. They're already in the system, they're already trained, and they're able to respond at a moment's notice.
That's great, because there's so many people that would like to give back.
Right.
And would like to be a part of the organization, whether it be a college kid, trying to get some extra, volunteer work in, seniors, everybody across the board. I think you really, can benefit from so many people being a part of the organization.
Volunteers are the heartbeat of the organization.
They are.
We rely heavily on
Right.
generous.
And they do make a difference, you're right.
Individuals.
Tell us about some of the training available. You mentioned health and safety classes and services, CPR, AED. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right, so those are specific to health and safety classes. So we
Okay.
do the CPR and the first aid and the babysitters and the AED. In order to be a disaster responder, there
Okay.
is a whole plethora of classes that folks can take. And if you think about Thomas Fire, so some of the services that we offered, from feeding, sheltering, of course. These shelters don't just appear.
Right.
We also have logistics, so folks that are running supplies, stocking the warehouses, keeping those trailers I mentioned,
Okay.
up to date and ready to go. We also have nurses, so people that have a background in nursing or counseling. We're always looking for folks like that. And there's opportunities, of course, for training around the logistical pieces and the sheltering, that what we call that mass care. So even though we do a lot of the sheltering, what people don't necessarily realize is when folks are in the shelter, we also do casework. So we have folks that are trained on casework, which is another class that people can take, and it's a huge need that we always have, where folks are able to sit down and have one-on-one conversations with the client or the family. They assess their needs, they identify what their gaps look like, and they really help them build a customized recovery plan. And whether that is that they have a home to return to, or perhaps they don't, and helping them, identify if the Red Cross isn't able to actually fill the gap, then we refer them and provide resources elsewhere and work in collaboration, of course, with many community partners.
And those resources are valuable. I mean, they're so valuable.
Absolutely.
Because someone, as you mentioned, may not have a home to go back to. And in that case, now what? What's next?
Exactly.
So it's very crucial to have that in place. What initially inspired the launch of the American Red Cross? Can you give us a little background information on that?
So it's interesting that you say that, most people don't really recognize the fact that we do so much work with the military, because we were actually founded literally on the battlefields by a woman named Clara Barton. And to be a woman now in a leadership position for such an iconic, organization, I love her story. But Clara Barton was a volunteer during the Civil War, and she was a self-taught nurse, and she was literally on the front lines, dragging soldiers back, providing aid, recognizing that they needed additional support. Came home to the United States and said, we need to do something, and she started the American Red Cross. And let me just say, at age 60, can you imagine?
What a woman to do that. Unbelievable.
So we literally were founded on the battlefield, as a byproduct of really our work with the soldiers.
That's great. That's really important. Very good to know that. What does it take for the American Red Cross to survive and thrive and keep doing what it does?
Again.
So effectively, too.
Well, again, it is only because of our dedicated, devoted volunteers and our very generous donors that we're able to do what we do day in and day out.
Yeah, and for those who wish to donate and volunteer, can you give the website?
Sure. So we would love for people to go to www.redcross.org, and then they'll be able to search by their zip code and pull up the local chapter, which is the Ventura County chapter. And they will, be able to sort the information based on what their area of interest is. And of course, they can always come into our office as well, and we're happy to help.
That's great. One thing I do want to mention is the life-saving blood donations that come through from the American Red Cross. It's so vital, so very important to so many people out there. And I would like to know how that is continuing here in Ventura County as well.
Absolutely. So, I think one of the most misconceptions as just a member of the community is that if you're in need, you go to the hospital and you get the blood that you need immediately, and that is just not always the case. Especially in this day and age where we're detecting illness and disease more effectively, and treatments are, we're seeing more blood transfusions. So there is a specific need for blood. So not everyone can give. If you can, it is extremely important. So we do operate blood collections throughout the year, and folks again can call our office to find out what that schedule is looking like. But at the end of the day, whether you give to the American Red Cross or to another organization that's collecting blood, the important thing to do is that you give.
That's important. Make an impact, volunteer, and donate today. That's what counts. That's really the important part of all of this. And it will keep the American Red Cross doing so many good things for so many people, especially here in Ventura County. And we can't thank you enough for all that you've done. It's an amazing organization, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you, and thank you for your support.
Okay, take care and keep all that great happening for Ventura County going.
We will.
And let's get some more volunteers for you guys,
We will, yes, we'd love it. We'd love it. We welcome them all.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. Kimberly Coley from the American Red Cross here in Ventura County. Thanks. And thank all of you for joining us today on Our Ventura TV. And I'll see you next time. I'm Sandra Seapack. Bye, everyone.